Good morning, everyone. Warwick Smith, Eric Saderholm, and Jonas Lang from American Pacific Mining Corp. coming to you today on March 31st. Excited to talk about our upcoming drill program here for the Madison mine in Montana.
So, typically we look at the mining business and it's a well-known strategy to look for a new mine today where one was historically extracted. And that's no different here at Madison. Certainly we've seen small scale, high grade mining historically take place and plenty of opportunity to extend and expand beyond what's been mined out historically. That being said, with the technical team's work over the past year, drilling, further integration of geophysics, a lot of modeling, field campaigns, new surveys, we've put together a view from more of a 10,000 foot perspective that highlights really high impact drilling, which includes deeper porphyry shots, new regional targets that have high grade at surface that have never been tested, in addition to stepping out beyond some of these historically mined areas. So collectively, very excited, 3,000 meters to start with a second phase planned here later this year. All of which we think can be high impact for shareholders.
Yeah, as Jonas has said, credit to the technical team who have spent a lot of time compiling all of this data and coming up with some really exciting targets that have never been drilled. Probably most exciting, the porphyry targets, which Eric's going to describe here shortly. But obviously, when you get the opportunity to go for something that's big and exciting, those are drill shots that you really want to take. Particularly at $3,000 gold and $5 copper. So we're very excited to get out and drill those. There are some new regional exploration targets as well, some really high grade banded veining that we're going to be able to trench at surface that's just under about 6 feet of gravels. It's never been tested. It was up to 80 grams gold at surface. And then some near mine high grade areas that we're going to test. Not at Madison, but actually at Broadway, which produced 144,000 ounces of gold just out of the oxides. Where we've had the most success we've had over at Madison has been actually in the sulfidic material, which has been incredibly high grade. Back in the late 1800s to 1950s, they wouldn't have touched that at Broadway. So we have every reason to believe that exists there. And so we're going to get drilling there as well. For the porphyry, I want to draw a couple of comparables here for the big prize that we're looking for. Fortitude probably being the closest analogy, which is a 2.5 million ounce skarn at surface, but vectors down to a 25 million ounce gold porphyry with 3 billion pounds of copper. Eric was chief geo there, knows the deposit incredibly well, and I'll let him talk about that in a little bit here as well. But also Hercules, which is in Idaho. One of the interesting things with Hercules is they had 300 drill holes in advance of drilling a deep shot, which is where they got into the porphyry and turned that company at that time into a $500-600 million market cap overnight. Those are the shots we're taking. That's the outcome we'd love to see at the end of it with success. And we're very excited to get drilling these targets. This is a 4 kilometer by 2 kilometer project. So there is a lot of room to put metal in the middle. This is the location. So we are very close to the Butte mine, which produced 21 billion pounds of copper, 3 million ounces of gold, and 750 million ounces of silver out of the same rocks. Golden Sunlight is just above us. That was run by Barrick. The Empire mine is another great example. Very similar geology to what we have. Kumo is another nice size, a porphyry there as well. Eric, maybe you want to touch on the belt for a second.
Well, this is a historically known porphyry belt. It extends from southern Idaho all the way into Saskatchewan, so it's quite well known. It's also not that well explored, unless the deposits were really staring at you, a la the Butte and the Golden Sunlight. Some of these have a thin cover on them or a capping rock. So the potential along this belt is quite profound. And some majors are up there working at the moment. They have projects in the area. So it's not like we're alone. It's really catching on up there as people look for these larger porphyry systems. This right here shows the nature of the mineralization there, which is it's quite fun to look at with the massive sulfide that can run quite high grade. The oxide, which is traditionally mined for the gold back in the 1950s, was when they quit. And then the native copper, which is a bit unique to this type of deposit. So in this type of deposit, you're really looking for skarns, which we have, CRDs, which we have epithermal veins that are distal to the porphyry. It checks all the boxes for having porphyritic signatures, all these rocks that you're looking at right here.
Here's the historical database. And I think this is a really important point. We've got over 50,000 meters of drilling, which we can rely upon, which is going to help us both with building a resource out of this project, but also helping us target as well. There's an additional 14,000 samples that are in the database. One of the most interesting parts now is during this off season between drill campaigns, the technical team was able to find an IP survey that was done some time ago, but was never incorporated into the model. It's an IP survey that we were planning on doing ourselves. Would have cost us around $250,000 to do that survey. Now being able to tie all of that data together has been incredibly helpful as we look to go forward and drill these targets. Eric, I'll let you talk a bit about these different surveys which have helped us target going forward. I think it's worth mentioning, one of the best things that you can do before you drill is do all of the pre-work that you can, so you target in as succinctly as possible, which is something that's been done really well here.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is just to take a half-baked data set and go out and start to drill holes, because that's a waste of your money and the investor's money. But what we see here are a series of surveys. The one to the left is a magnetic survey that was done by a predecessor, and they never even used it. They drilled their last holes before they got the final data on this. And consulting with them, they've said, well, if we'd had the data before we drilled the holes, we probably would have drilled our holes in different places. So it's a little bit, cart before the horse, like I said. But now we have it. We've incorporated it into our exploration program, and it showed us some quite interesting features. The magnetic highs out there do represent potential porphyry, and the grades corresponding above them are quite high. The center shot you see there is that's a potassium survey that we did. It's traditionally used for uranium, but we decided we wanted to see the potassium, the thorium, and the uranium within the system. It really showed us potassium being mobile and moving into certain areas around those magnetic highs. Very important when it comes to porphyry exploration is the potassium.
And the final one here on the right is just a zoom in of that IP we spoke about that would have had a $250,000 replacement cost. So we'll show some sections here during the presentation that zoom in on some of these anomalies.
And Eric, I think one of the points that you've made to Jonas and myself is that by putting all of these three together, it's giving you great targets that you're really excited about on the porphyry side.
Yes, it has. If you look at this slide here, cuts right through the Madison system. And this is the Silver Star Fault, which stretches up directly into the Butte area. So this fault is a regional structure, very, very strong. And you can see the bluer rock off to the right side or the east side of the screen is our potential skarn hosts, which will probably project underneath the fault. The brownish material is it's cut with very rich quartz veins. It's metamorphic rock, and we think that that's probably where the porphyry sits, underneath that, off to the southwest or directly underneath it. That's what it looks like to us. Looks like the heat source has moved the mineralization into the skarns. The skarns have been tested just minimally at the very north end of the property, but the potential to increase that skarn body all the way to essentially off the property, off to the, almost to the town is really, really strong. Lots of indicators.
And these porphyry targets have never been tested as well, which gives us a lot of excitement to go and drill these, to say the least. To be clear, we have the permit in hand. We are ready to drill. We're going to be a 3,000 meter program to start. Deepest hole will be 700 meters. And I mentioned the mineralized footprint is 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It's nice because from what we can decipher so far, it doesn't look like the porphyry is going to be incredibly deep. That's our initial interpretation. And that entire program is going to cost about $1.4 million Canadian. And as a reminder, we have over $15 million in cash. So we are well financed to do this program.
So as Warwick mentioned, we had a lot of data that came in that was existing that we didn't pay for. We just interpreted it and put it into 3D space and modeled it. This kind of a complicated slide here, but it shows the proposed holes. Not all of these will be drilled. They'll be drilled based upon success of the initial holes. Initial holes will be taking the best shot at a target, but we're permitted to drill. If we have success in one, we'll drill another one from the same site. The little red oval at the top there is the concentration of 98% of the drilling that's been done on this property. So it's been concentrated on the skarns in and around Madison. The rest of the area is very well mineralized, at least from our surface sampling. So this just shows our target areas. It also shows, I like to highlight a little bit, the newly discovered portion down in the southwest, the yellow oval. That had never been sampled before and had not really been evaluated, and kind of has not been. It was our last thing we did in October last year before we got the winter snows, and we were picking up to 14-gram gold along those structures. So that will take a little more evaluation, and that'll certainly warrant a couple of drill holes in the future. This highlights the potassium survey from the radiometrics, which we didn't really have a lot of faith that it would do anything, but it sure showed us a lot of things that we weren't expecting. So you can see the yellow is the potassium highs or moved highs. You can see our pork target in the middle of the screen, and our MG target are drilling into what we think are porphyry targets. Be a little deeper holes, but they also have superficial gold values up to 80 grams per ton, which is pretty impressive. This one here is a nice cartoon slide that was drawn up that we've altered a little bit. But this hole, this is one of our first phases. This is the permitted hole. You can see that it will be drilling through the skarn body and into an interpreted porphyritic intrusive body. So it'll cover two bases all at once. Drill through what we think is the southern extension of the gold-bearing skarn, and into a porphyritic rock or a hypothetical porphyritic rock that could be driving part of the system.
I think this is a great slide. I mean, if you look at the top piece there where you've got the cutout, I mean, that was 144,000 ounces of oxide that came out of there. You can see there's still an awful lot of room to move in there to both go down to the porphyry, which is a really interesting shot, but also for the skarn as well. This was flooded out. They stopped drilling during the war due to the Wartime Act. And then when they went back in the 1950s, it was quite flooded. They did a little bit of work, but that was it. There is a real potential here that we're incredibly excited to drill.
And never been drilled at all. No drill holes in the area.
Yeah.
So this is an IP survey, so chargeability, and it's the data that we found in an old box, and we were about ready to, as Warwick said, commission a $250,000 survey, and it turns out we already had it, but it wasn't in our data set. So it was archived up in boxes on site. So we had it all put into 3 dimensions so that we could have a better look at it and see how it corresponded with our other data sets. And it picks up some very interesting areas. So you can see that we'll be drilling MG1, and then pork moving to the south, we'll be drilling into what we think is a similar anomaly. So they're looking very, very intrusive. That the more intrusive phases you have in the system, the better. Right now, including our basaltic dikes, which have a lot of high-grade gold associated with them, we have five intrusives, and we actually anticipate hitting more with depth in drilling. Once again, the chargeability high, and also that's a mag high corresponding to it. That's a nice sign, a good magnetic signature, especially when it's got some kind of cylindrical appearance, is something to drill at. Porphyry sometimes will have the interior of the porphyry won't be particularly well mineralized until you get deeper, but the skarns can be super high grade, and we expect maybe even CRDs that will hit in this. So we're in the perfect environment for porphyry and porphyry style mineralization. This shows our surface sample. You can understand why we're excited about what the surface looks like if it has 80 grams of gold in quartz veins, which is very typical. This shows a very throat-like appearance anyways of the geophysics, so the chargeability high and low. That's very intriguing. That looks very much like it has deep roots. And so we'll be testing that for sure with our second phase, but they're going to sequence into one another. Phase 1 and phase 2 are just a matter of permitting.
So this was a drill hole. It was drilled in 2017 by the predecessor company that drilled into the porphyry. You can see that into the latite porphyry. You can see that rock is hammered, and that's the fourth mineralizing event. So there's something happening below this that's hammering that rock, and that's where we think we can get some real joy on this. Eric, happy to pass to you on that.
Yeah, you can see that the alteration is relatively intense. It's marbleization on the left box, so that used to be a dolomite. And then the rock on the right side is latite porphyry, and it's, as Rorik said, it's quite altered. It's not certainly what it didn't look like. It didn't look like that when it came up. So that right there is a strong sign that there's another intrusive event that's altering that particular phase.
Again, this was drilled pre having the benefit of that mag and some of the other data sets, these coincident anomalies that are kind of supporting our targeting today. So this is very encouraging, but was drilled off the edges in our view. So again, just further support for the targets and shots we'll be taking this year.
And Eric, just for people's understanding, the Skarn has been incredibly high grade. For reference, between 2008 and 2012, produced 2.7 million pounds of copper, between 20 and 35% copper. It's carried some incredible gold grades as well. And the thesis here is that there's a big porphyry below that's cooking that and pushing that mineralization upwards. So that's the thesis here, correct?
Yes. When you have that kind of value in mineralization that's obviously distal to a porphyry, it's pretty exciting because that's the highest grade skarn I've ever seen. It far beats in grade anyways the fortitude grades. You're talking 2 or 3 times as rich. So the thesis would be that the porphyry system should be a copper gold porphyry, which is what we're shooting for, and that it could be very well endowed if it's got distal expressions that have that kind of grades.
Excellent.
This is just a kind of a zoom in, and this was the data set that was given to us by Rio when they were there, and this they didn't use it. They drilled in 2021 and a little bit into 22, and they did this survey in 2022. So this was never used by them, but it's certainly being used by us. So we've incorporated this into our data set, and you can see that we're excited about the magnetic highs off to the west and to the southwest, and also the corresponding lows, which could be very indicative of magnetite destruction, which a lot of times can be where you're going to find your highest grades. So yeah, that's very exciting. And you can see the silver star fault there. Once again, we've refined that. It's more than one fault, which is good, which is a lot of fluid conduits and pathways for both porphyry and for fluids to get into the crust.
We're about to move to sections here, which are going to shift from mag to IP. You can see the section lines A and B. We'll have the porphyry targets, MG and pork on the left-hand side, and then moving into some of these regional or high-grade skarn targets as well.
So this one here is it's worth pointing out that we're using that IP survey that really came to us free for a fair amount of our targeting, but not just that. If you look at the grades, you have 40 grams, 38 grams, 39 grams in veins and structures that are associated with what we think is the heat source. So the drilling will actually be twofold. We'll be drilling through the structures that are providing up to 19, 20 grams gold, and then into the geophysical features, which have never before been tested. It's also worth pointing out too that a second or a third or maybe even a fourth style of mineralization we detected last year in our field work, and that's banded quartz veins that run up to about 80 grams per ton. They remind me a little bit of the AJ mine in Alaska, which it was sheeted veins. It wasn't just one vein, it was several veins. They were sometimes 2-3 feet thick, sometimes inches, but they were sheeted and wide enough that they produced relatively high grade gold, and I believe they produced about 3 million ounces from that. This is exactly the style of area or mineralization that I would expect here. It hasn't been tested before because it's very subdued. There's a little bit of gravel on top. Thus, we will trench this year through it to see if it does present us with another style of mineralization to pursue.
Yeah, Eric, I know this is one that both you and I have talked about, and we're both really excited about. So it's under about 6 feet of gravels, and we'll run some trenches through that and test those. But that's a pretty compelling target, one that we weren't super familiar with up until last year. This is a cartoon slide of the one that I referenced before. So this is just a drilling into the old Broadway mine there. So these are about 250-foot step outs. Eric, I'll let you talk about that and about how it's kind of open at depth and you can talk about that sort of mineralized mine horizon there, the dotted red line as well.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out too, and Warwick touched on it, that the old miners from 1910 to 1950 concentrated on gold-bearing jasperite. They didn't want copper in the process because they were using cyanide extraction, so copper would have gotten in the way. And they didn't want any sulfide because that also would have messed up their recoveries. So they concentrated on nothing but this essentially brown jasperite, which it's night and day from the sulfides that are next to it. Now the sulfides themselves would have remained in the mine and would not have been touched. So the red line there, you can see the superficial expression still has pretty good high-grade gold. There's 11 grams gold right along that contact that we took that shows that this does go that direction. The real big kicker here is the pink shape you see there's the Raider Creek, which is an intrusive body. It was never mined. In fact, it was kind of a footwall to mining. So when you hit it, you stopped because one, it's sulfidic, and two, it's high copper. It hasn't been tested because no one's really mined it or drilled into it. It presents us with a lot of tonnages. We'll look at a box here in a minute that shows the intense mineralization that can happen inside the Raider Creek. And then the blue material on the left side of the slide is carbonate, and that can all be skarn. So these shapes are not particularly wildly crazy. They look like something that we could definitely expand, and not just out to the west, but also to the southeast.
You know, we talk about high grades at Madison. I mean, 144 ounces at 4.5 grams per ton gold in oxide at surface is no joke. I mean, that's great grade in oxide.
Very good. So I think a lot of it's metallurgically driven. The old miners were just essentially told if it's starting to sparkle and it's black, you're done. So you mined out what you could in the oxide, which I think is a very small portion of the mineralization there. It just happened to fit with their mining methods. This shows again further evidence of relatively high grade at the Raider Creek contact in an area that hasn't been even explored at all or mined in the slightest. Once again, showing the potential off to the west, and then if you move in and out of that slide, there's nothing geologically to tell me that the skarn doesn't persist for kilometers, possibly off to the southeast. It just hasn't been drilled.
Go ahead, Eric. I was just going to say here's a quick recap of some of the drilling that we did last year, and then I'll let Eric talk directly on it. But you can see, you know, some of the grades that came out of this last drill campaign were pretty spectacular. Eric, if you want to talk about it a bit, that's fine. I'm happy to pass to you.
This is a nice box of core here, lower grade copper, but they weren't mining. When they got into lower grade copper, they essentially stopped. They weren't really specializing in the gold, which is good for us. But that 42 grams gold in that box is pretty impressive. And that is in the Raider Creek. That is in what I've been talking about, the endoskarn. So it's never been tested. That was where mining stopped. And look at the grades. This was an extension to the west of the Skarn, and it certainly paid off. We hit some very nice numbers. Look at the up to 24% copper, some native copper, some oxide copper. It's a resource that has not been exploited whatsoever, and it certainly hasn't been drilled out to the west. Our main goal will be to see if we can make the Skarn bigger to the southeast with shallower drilling, but eventually we'll have to key back in on this and see exactly where this goes and what it means.
Some nice longer runs on this too. 75.5 meters of 0.98 copper, 29.7 meters of 2% copper. Some good longer runs in there too. This is a great slide. Eric, I'll let you describe it, but I think this one really helps in terms of when we're targeting as well, right?
Well, this slide pretty much shows all the kind of rock types you're going to hit, at least in and around the mine, and then probably a little bit off to the west as well. You have a breccia there that's a marble breccia off to the left, a mafic dike, which is a little bit strange in these types of deposits, but every time we see these black mafic dikes, we have gold associated with them 100%. So we'll come to grips with exactly what that means, because that's another potential resource that has not been exploited by anyone. In fact, we're the first group to come up with the idea that these mafic dikes can host a lot of mineralization. The brown material you see in the next box is the jasperoid. So that looked very similar to what they mined at Broadway when they got into black material like that mafic dike is right when they stopped. So if you move through the box, you'll see this is just a beautiful box of core. This is exactly what you'll see, I think, in drilling the Skarn areas. The main thing here is this massive sulfide, which runs 146 grams AU. It's a thin piece of it, but we're under the assumption that this is exactly what stopped the mining at Broadway. They would, even regardless of the grade, this could not have been processed. So they quit mining when they hit this. Presents a possible resource in and around our current known mining area that has not been exploited at all. This is just a box to show what the endoskarn can do and what it can run. And this would have been where miners, regardless of the history of the mining, where they would have stopped mining. They would have said, this is it, we're done, let's go somewhere else. Well, for us, it's at 2.5 grams gold and 2% copper. It's pretty good grades. And this is a completely untested resource up and down this contact of this intrusive.
Okay, so to recap, 3,000 meters of drilling, targeting porphyry, targeting new banded veins, and targeting under mines that have never been drilled before. All new targets that have never been drilled. Incredibly excited about this program. Potentially the most excited I've been for Madison, which is saying something, because it's given us a lot of joy over the course of time. This program will start up in roughly 2 weeks' time. It'll cost roughly $1.4 million in cash. We have $15 million in cash today, so we are certainly very well funded to do this program and then continue on from there. Either of you gentlemen want to chime in before we sign off?
Yeah, I'll just say one final thing that's, we've seen a lot of the biggest porphyry discoveries globally occurring, up in the Andes or further afield. We certainly need these metals domestically in the US. There's no reason that belts like this one can't deliver significant deposits. So again, just to echo your sentiment, very excited to start taking shots where we think 600, 700, 800 meter level should be sufficient to tag into something significant here, which when you compare globally and with the grades we're seeing near surface is the reason we're quite excited. So look forward to getting underway.
I'll chime in on that as well. I mean, when companies are hitting into these porphyries, if you look at the Herculeses of the world, the ATEX, et cetera, they're all running to these $500-600 million market caps very quickly. So this is a high impact program. It's one of the reasons that we wanted to go after it. After Eric and the team's great work of really putting together strong targets, it's worthwhile to take these shots today when we think we can get a big outcome out of them as we go forward. So Eric, great work. Appreciate it as always, man. And really looking forward to this program. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody. And look forward to having some drill results out in the coming months.